How long have you been with us, Cassandra? 29 years, is it? Mark Halverson leaned back in his overpriced leather chair, twirling a Montblanc pen like he was auditioning for a corporate villain in a Hollywood blockbuster. His tone was too casual, too polished, like a predator sizing up its prey before the kill. 29 years and 362 days. I shot back, my voice steady despite the cold not twisting in my gut. I stared at the manila folder on his desk, its edges crisp and unopened, a silent threat in the sterile fluorescence of his office. In nearly 3 decades at Halverson Industries, I'd never been summoned to a director's office on a Friday afternoon. Something was wrong. Dead wrong. Just last week, I'd saved the company from a potential compliance disaster with a supplier in Taiwan, a $5 million contract teetering on the edge of collapse. I'd spotted a loophole in their export documentation, a sneaky violation of trade regs that even legal had missed. It took me 3 sleepless nights, cross-referencing customs logs and supplier emails, but I'd nailed it. Mark had congratulated me in front of the whole compliance team, his voice dripping with that half-hearted charm he wielded like a prop. "Cassandra's our rock," he'd said, smirking as if it pained him to admit it, the Montblanc glinting in his hand. The team clapped. I nodded, thinking it meant something. Now, staring at that manila folder, I realized it meant nothing at all. "I see," he said, his eyes flicking to the folder like it was a loaded gun he couldn't wait to fire. "That's quite the run, Cassandra." I didn't respond. Silence was my weapon, honed in boardrooms filled with men who thought I was just the paperwork lady, a cog in their profit machine. He slid the folder across the glossy mahogany desk with one manicured finger. "Due to budget constraints, we're letting you go. Effective immediately." The words hit like a sucker punch to the chest, but I didn't flinch. No handshake. No, thanks for your service. Just a cold, calculated dismissal after 29 years and 362 goddamn days of blood, sweat, and loyalty. Budget constraints. I repeated, my tone flat, but edged with venom. Funny, Mark. Last quarter's record profits didn't stop you from buying that private jet for the execs, or the custom desk you're smirking behind right now. He blinked, caught off guard, his perfect mask slipping for a split second. Good. He'd expected me to crumble, to beg, to fade quietly. Instead, I was calling his bluff, and he didn't like it one bit. "It's not personal," he muttered, avoiding my gaze like a coward. "Sign this severance package by tomorrow, or you forfeit it entirely. HR will escort you out." 3 days. That's what this was really about. 3 days before my pension vested. Decades of late nights, missed family dinners, and building their compliance system from scratch, all erased to save them a buck and keep their dirty secrets buried. This wasn't about budget cuts. This was a hit job, timed with surgical precision. I stood, snatching the folder without breaking eye contact. "Thanks for the opportunity, Mark. Enjoy the view from that leather throne. It's a long fall when the ground gives out." His mouth twitched, but he said nothing. He'd wanted tears, pleading, maybe a dramatic scene he could spin to the board. What he got instead was the quiet, seething fury of a woman who'd seen the blade coming and wasn't about to let it draw blood without a fight. Janet from HR waited outside with a cardboard box, her eyes red-rimmed and apologetic. "I'm so sorry, Cassandra," she whispered, clutching the box like it was a lifeline. "Don't be," I said, shoving my framed photo of Thomas and Sophie into it, the glass cool against my trembling fingers. "They're the ones who should be sorry, and they will be." As I walked out, had high-paced whispering coworkers and the hum of fluorescent lights, I felt it, a spark igniting beneath the betrayal. They thought they'd silenced me, buried me under their lies. But they didn't know the woman they'd just unleashed. I wasn't just a compliance officer. I was the conscience they'd tried to muzzle for years. And now, they'd made their fatal mistake. Calling out Mark's lie in the moment, planting the first seed of defiance, and unsettling him. The April rain pounded my windshield as I drove through the familiar streets of St. Paul, the unopened folder glaring at me from the passenger seat like an accusation. My knuckles whitened on the steering wheel, the silence in the car louder than the storm raging outside. I passed the cathedral where Thomas and I had said "I do" under stained glass and hope, the school where Sophie had graduated in a blur of proud tears, the park where we tossed frisbees on lazy Sundays before life turned into deadlines and corporate games. It was all still there, frozen in time, mocking me with its sameness while my world tilted off its axis. 29 years. 3 days shy of the pension I'd earned with every late-night audit, every ignored warning about their shady numbers, every time I'd put the company's rules over my own family. This wasn't random. Mark didn't fire me to save money. He fired me to bury me. I'd been their conscience too long, the one who wouldn't sign off on his cost-cutting schemes that broke every federal regulation in the book, schemes that could have endangered lives if I'd let them slide. I pulled into the driveway of the modest brick house Thomas, and I had paid off before cancer stole him from me. Sitting there, rain blurring my reflection in the rearview mirror, I saw a woman who wasn't broken, just pissed. And dangerous. Determined. Inside, I brewed tea with trembling hands, the steam curling up like the rage I'd bottled for years. At the kitchen table, where I'd helped Sophie with algebra and pored over compliance logs until dawn, I opened the folder. 3 months' salary. No healthcare. No pension. A gag order buried in dense legal jargon, designed to intimidate me into silence. Sign by 5 p.m. tomorrow, or walk away with nothing. It wasn't a severance package. It was a bribe to disappear, a cheap payoff for 3 decades of loyalty. My phone buzzed on the table. Sophie's name flashed on the screen. "Mom, you okay?" Janet called me, said you got fired. Her voice cracked with worry, the kind only a daughter could carry. "They didn't just fire me," I said, staring at the papers until the words blurred. "They stabbed me in the back 3 days before I could cash out everything I've worked for."
"What?"
"That's illegal. You should sue them. Drag them through the courts." "I'm not sure yet," I lied, my mind already racing past lawsuits to something bigger, something they'd never see coming. "Mom, don't let them walk all over you. Dad always said you were tougher than they ever knew, tougher than steel." I swallowed hard, a lump rising in my throat. Thomas. He'd called my attention to detail my superpower, teasing me over late-night coffee as I scribbled notes in the margins of reports. Now it was my weapon, and his memory was my shield. After hanging up, I stood and walked down the hall, my steps deliberate. I unlocked my home office, a small sanctuary of order amid the chaos. Behind a row of family photos, Thomas grinning at the lake, Sophie in her cap and gown, sat a fireproof lockbox, my insurance policy against the day I'd always feared might come. I opened it with steady hands, pulling out 4 years' worth of dirt. Internal emails, falsified loan applications, backdated quality control certifications, quarterly revenue reports that didn't match the shipping logs. I'd brought them home one by one, filed them meticulously, not because I'd planned to be a whistleblower, but because I'd sensed the rot spreading beneath the polished surface of Halverson Industries. Every page screamed one thing: fraud. Systemic, deliberate, and covered up by the very people who'd just cut me loose. I'd reported it all, 47 times, through proper channels. Emails marked urgent, that went unanswered. Memos dismissed as overreacting. Meetings canceled with flimsy excuses. They patted me on the head, called me too focused on details, and laughed behind my back. Not anymore. I scrolled through my contacts until I found Caleb Monroe, former CFO at Halverson Industries, now with the Securities and Exchange Commission. He'd seen the rot before he jumped ship 3 years ago, a numbers man with a conscience sharper than most. My thumb hovered over the call button, hesitation flickering for a heartbeat. Then I pressed it. The line rang once.
Twice.
Then, "Cassandra?" His voice was sharp, tinged with surprise. "It's been a while." "Caleb, it's time," I said, my voice steady as steel. "Mark Halverson's gone too far, and I've got the receipts to bury him." A beat of silence. Then, "Holy hell, you've been sitting on this for years' worth," I said. "They fired me today, 3 days before my pension. It's not a coincidence." He let out a low whistle. You're a damn machine, Cass. I'm in. Let's burn it down. For the first time all day, I smiled, a small, dangerous curve of my lips. Securing Caleb as an ally, turning isolation into a team effort, and setting the stage for a fight. Monday dawned gray and heavy, the clouds hanging low over St. Paul like a shroud. I hadn't slept much, too busy cross-referencing files, reliving years of betrayal, but I woke with fire in my veins and a clarity I hadn't felt in decades. I slipped into my navy blue suit, Thomas's old nickname for it echoing in my mind. Battle armor. Today, it fit the bill perfectly. I packed my leather briefcase with 3 identical sets of files, chronologically organized, indexed, cross-referenced. One for the SEC, one for my attorney, one for me. A fortress of evidence, built brick by damming brick over 4 long years. The federal building downtown loomed like a monolith of glass and steel, a temple of justice rising from the concrete jungle. I parked out front, took a deep breath, and stepped into the fray. Caleb met me in the lobby, grayer now than at that last company holiday party, but his eyes still held that quiet intensity I'd always trusted. He shook my hand firmly, his grip a lifeline. "You sure about this?" he asked, searching my face. "They underestimated me for 30 years, I said, meeting his gaze. "I'm done playing nice. Let's make them pay." He grinned, a spark of mischief in his eyes. "Let's burn it down then." He led me through security, metal detectors beeping, guards nodding, and into a sleek conference room where 2 others waited. Angela Brennan, Senior Enforcement Counsel, had eyes like a hawk and a handshake like iron. James Weston, Forensic Accounting Specialist, looked like he'd rather be crunching numbers in a basement than facing a live witness. "Before we start," Angela said, her voice crisp, "you need to know, once you share this, it's official. An investigation launches. There's no going back. You understand?" "Good," I said, setting my briefcase on the table with a thud. I've been waiting 4 years to stop running. What followed was 3 hours of controlled detonation. I walked them through it all, starting with the first irregular invoice I'd flagged 4 years ago, a $2 million loan app with income figures that didn't add up. Then the manipulated quarterly reports, inflated by millions to impress Wall Street. The backdated quality control certifications that could have put lives at risk if I hadn't caught them. And the pattern of dismissal. Emails ignored, meetings canceled, my warnings brushed off like lint on their tailored suits. When I reached the kicker, Mark firing me 3 days before my pension vested, Angela's pen froze mid-note. 3 days? She asked, incredulous. They timed this. Down to the hour, I said flatly. It's not a layoff, it's a guillotine. James flipped through the files, his disbelief growing with every page. This isn't sloppy bookkeeping. It's deliberate fraud, 18% revenue inflation for 2 years minimum. They're toast. Angela leaned forward, her gaze piercing. "And you reported this internally?" 47 reports, I said, sliding over a printed index. 16 memos. 9 formal meeting requests. All documented. Most ignored. A few got me laughed at in board meetings. Caleb smirked from the corner. "Told you she's a machine." The room went quiet, the weight of my words settling like dust after an explosion. Angela finally exhaled, tapping her pen. "This isn't just wrongful termination, Cassandra. It's a textbook whistleblower case. Halverson Industries could be facing fines in the hundreds of millions, maybe criminal charges." "They counted on me being too tired to fight," I said, folding my hands. "Too close to retirement to care. They were wrong." "They were very, very wrong," Caleb added, his voice low and satisfied. As we wrapped up, Angela outlined next steps, a formal statement, preservation orders, an internal SEC probe. "They'll know we've opened a case by tonight," she warned. "Expect pushback, hard." "Let them try," I said, standing. "I've got nothing left to lose, and everything to gain." Walking out of that building, the clouds didn't feel oppressive anymore. They felt like cover for the storm I'd just unleashed, a tempest that would drown Halverson Industries in its own lies. That night, my voicemail overflowed. Janet, her voice shaky. Cassandra, what's happening? Mark, suddenly polite. Let's talk this over. The general counsel, all bluster. You're making a mistake. I deleted them all, one by one, the sound of each erasure a tiny victory. Successfully delivering the evidence to the SEC, shifting the power dynamic, and igniting the investigation. Tuesday hit like a freight train barreling through a quiet town. The St. Paul Tribune screamed from every newsstand. SEC opens investigation into Halverson Industries. Allegations of fraud surface. By noon, it was national. CNN, CNBC, The Wall Street Journal. Questionable leadership. Financial discrepancies. A whistleblower source close to the company. My name wasn't out yet, but the dominoes were falling, and the sound was deafening. At 9:12 a.m., Janet called, breathless and near tears. Cassandra, it's chaos here. The board's in an emergency meeting. Mark's locked in his office. No one's seen him since 7 a.m. Legal's freaking out, shredding papers like it's Watergate. Did I start this? I asked, feigning innocence as I sipped my coffee. Did you report something? Her voice trembled, caught between fear and awe. I did what they should have done years ago, I said, calm as the eye of a hurricane. She hesitated. Cassandra, there's something else. I overheard Mark on a call last night, before all this broke. He said your firing wasn't just his idea. Someone else pushed for it. Someone you trusted. My blood ran cold.
Who?
I don't know, she whispered. But he said, she'll never suspect it came from her own team. I thought you should know. I hung up, my mind racing. A traitor? Someone I'd worked with, confided in, maybe even mentored? The betrayal cut deeper than Mark's smug dismissal, a knife twisting in an already open wound. By 3:46 p.m., Douglas Stratton, chairman of the board, called from a private number. His voice was tight, laced with desperation. Miss Ellis, we seem to have a situation requiring your input. Would you be open to meeting with the board tomorrow morning? I nearly laughed. 5 days ago, they tossed me out like yesterday's trash. Now, they were begging me to bail them out? Sorry, Doug, I said smoothly, my tone dripping with ice. Any further discussion needs to include my attorney, and maybe the SEC. I'm sure you understand why. A beat of silence. I see, he replied, his composure cracking. Perhaps we can arrange something more formal then. Perhaps, I said. Have your office call my lawyer. I hung up, my hands trembling. Not with fear, but with a righteous fury I could barely contain. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, my doorbell rang. I peered through the peephole and froze. Mark Halverson stood on my porch, tie loose, clutching a cheap manila envelope. His tailored suit looked out of place against the modest brick of my steps, his eyes wild with panic. Cassandra, he called through the door, his voice a mix of bravado and desperation. This is ridiculous. Let's be reasonable. Sign this agreement, and we can make this all go away. Go away. I yanked the door open, stepping out to face him, my voice low and lethal. Like the 47 reports you buried? Like the pension you stole 3 days before it vested? You don't get to erase me, Mark. Not this time, not ever. He flinched, his facade crumbling. You don't know what you're up against, he hissed. You think I acted alone? Someone you trusted sold you out, fed me every move you made.
Who?
I demanded, stepping closer, my heart pounding. He smirked, regaining a shred of his old arrogance. Figure it out, Cassandra. You're so good at details, right? He shoved the envelope into my mailbox and retreated to his black sedan, tires squealing as he peeled away. I retrieved the note, my hand steady despite the storm inside me. Final opportunity. Signed by 9 a.m. Wednesday. Same old bribe. But his words echoed louder. Who had betrayed me? Facing Mark head-on, reclaiming her voice, and uncovering a hint of the twist, a traitor in her ranks. Wednesday morning, Halverson Industries was a house of cards in a Category 5 hurricane. The news had gone viral. Stock plummeted 20%, headlines screaming systemic fraud, executive misconduct, and whistleblower retaliation. My name broke wide open. Cassandra Ellis, the woman they couldn't silence. At 8:07 a.m., a courier delivered a formal letter, email and hard copy, straight from the company's legal department. Termination rescinded. Administrative leave initiated. Full benefits restored. Pension included. A legal Hail Mary, transparent and laughably late. At 10 a.m., I walked into their headquarters with my attorney, Barbara Chen, a shark in a silk blouse. The same security guard who'd escorted me out 5 days ago now held the door. "Welcome back, Ms. Ellis," he murmured, eyes downcast. The boardroom was a circus of tailored suits and palpable regret. Douglas Stratton sat front and center, flanked by 2 outside counsel and 3 other board members. Mark was conspicuously absent, a ghost already fading from their narrative. Stratton tried for warmth and landed somewhere between guilt and desperation. "Miss Ellis, thank you for agreeing to meet. We're taking the situation very seriously." Barbara cut in before I could open my mouth. "Let's be clear, Mr. Stratton. Ms. Ellis didn't suddenly raise concerns. She documented and reported these violations 47 times over 4 years. Your client's decision to terminate her 3 days before her pension vested wasn't just unethical, it was strategic retaliation, and it's going to cost you." Stratton shifted uncomfortably, his tie suddenly too tight. "Yes, well, that's part of what we're investigating internally." I leaned forward, my voice calm but cutting. "I have one question. Is my pension guaranteed?" He nodded quickly, too quickly. "Of course. Fully reinstated, retroactively. In fact, we're prepared to offer you a consulting role, post-retirement, to build a new ethics division. Your insight is invaluable." Barbara smirked. "Any discussion of future involvement is premature. First, there needs to be full transparency about who authorized the suppression of Ms. Ellis's reports and who profited from that silence." What followed was an hour of carefully worded tap dancing. The board distanced themselves from Mark, expressed shock, disappointment, regret. All the buzzwords people trot out when they're caught red-handed. I listened, my mind half on their excuses, half on Mark's taunt. A traitor. Someone I'd trusted. Then it hit me, Janet. Sweet, nervous Janet, who'd always been too close, too eager to help. She'd had access to my files, my warnings. Had she been feeding Mark intel all along? The thought made my stomach churn, but I kept my face a mask. When we rose to leave, Stratton made one last plea. "Cassandra, we hope you'll speak to the SEC about the corrective actions we're taking. Your cooperation could." I turned to face him fully, locking eyes with the man who'd once called me the paperwork lady, in front of junior staff like it was a punchline. "I filed 47 reports," I said, my voice steady as granite. "Sent 16 memos. Requested 9 meetings. You ignored every single one. Don't talk to me about cooperation, Doug. Talk to your conscience if you can find it." Silence blanketed the room, thick and suffocating. Barbara opened the door, and I walked out without looking back. Not a sound followed me, forcing the board to grovel, securing her pension, and planting suspicion about Janet. By Friday, exactly 1 week after they'd handed me that cardboard box and a folder of lies, Halverson Industries was a cautionary tale etched in headlines. The SEC moved fast. By noon, they'd issued subpoenas to current and former executives. Search warrants hit the C-suite offices like thunderbolts. That same day, the company announced Mark Halverson's suspension and the resignation of 4 board members, including Stratton. The headlines were brutal. Halverson Industries implodes under fraud probe. Whistleblowers' evidence triggers federal action. The woman they tried to silence. That woman was me. I hadn't asked for the spotlight, but now that it was here, I stood in it without flinching. They tried to write me out of their story. Now, I was the footnote they couldn't erase, and the headline they couldn't bury. Monday morning, I sat across from Patricia Kim, the newly appointed interim CEO, in Barbara's sleek downtown office. Unlike the others, Patricia didn't waste time with fake smiles. "The company's in freefall," she said, setting a thick folder in front of me. "And you, Ms. Ellis, are the only reason it hasn't completely collapsed into ash. Inside, full retroactive reinstatement, pension vesting, 5 years' salary as compensation, lifetime health care, and a signed letter of apology from the board. But that wasn't all. We're creating an independent ethics and compliance division, she continued, her tone brisk. We'd like you to design it as a consultant after your retirement. I closed the folder, my expression unreadable. It was generous, strategic, no doubt, but it wasn't about the money. It never had been. And Mark? I asked, my voice low. Terminated for cause, she said. Criminal charges are imminent. Securities fraud, obstruction, the works. What about Janet Briggs? I pressed, watching her closely. Patricia frowned. HR? What about her? She was my shadow for years, I said. Knew every report I filed. Mark hinted someone close betrayed me. I think it was her. Patricia's eyes widened, then narrowed. We'll look into it. If she's dirty, she's gone. 6 months later, I sat in a federal courtroom, the air thick with tension. Mark Halverson and 2 former board members entered guilty pleas, securities fraud, obstruction of justice, conspiracy. They looked smaller somehow, stripped of their suits and smugness, their power undone by the paper trail they'd thought no one would follow. A familiar Montblanc pen sat among the evidence on the prosecution's table, Mark's prized possession, now a silent witness to his downfall. Mark's eyes met mine across the room. He didn't see a former compliance officer. He saw a reckoning. Then came the bombshell. The prosecutor called a surprise witness, Janet Briggs. She shuffled to the stand, pale and trembling, avoiding my gaze. Under oath, she admitted it. She'd been Mark's mole, feeding him my reports, warning him every time I got too close to the truth. She'd done it for a promotion, a corner office, a slice of their dirty pie.
Why?
I whispered to Barbara as Janet's testimony unfolded. Greed, Barbara muttered. And cowardice. The courtroom buzzed, but I sat still, the sting of her betrayal cutting deeper than I'd expected. She'd been my friend, or so I'd thought. For a moment, something in me cracked. Not anger.
Grief.
The late-night chats, the shared coffee breaks, the trust I'd given her, all lies. But I locked it down the way I'd learned to for 30 years, my face a mask of steel. As Janet stepped down from the stand, our eyes met for the first time since this all began. Her lips parted, maybe to apologize, maybe to explain, but I turned away, my shoulders squared, my gaze fixed on the judge. Let her explain that to her own conscience. I didn't need her words. I'd already won. With my settlement and whistleblower reward, 15% of the $20 million in penalties, a cool $3 million, I had more financial security than I'd ever dreamed. I poured a chunk into the Thomas Ellis Integrity Fund, a scholarship for women pursuing careers in corporate ethics. Thomas had always believed my obsession with details was a strength. Now it would live on, lifting others up. Later, I added one more item to my home office lockbox, the Montblanc pen Mark had twirled that day. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder of how they underestimated the woman holding the real ledger. Sophie and her 2 kids moved back to St. Paul. We spent weekends at the lake house I'd bought with part of the settlement, laughing over pancakes, fishing off the dock, building the life I'd sacrificed for too long. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Sophie asked, "Do you regret staying at Halverson all those years?" I paused, the lake's reflection shimmering in my eyes. "No," I said finally. "I regret that doing the right thing cost me so much time with you, with Dad. But I don't regret doing it. Not for a second." She hugged me tight. "You taught me what integrity looks like, not just in words, but in action. You're my hero, Mom." That, I realized, was the real legacy. Not just surviving injustice, but confronting it head-on. Not just gathering evidence, but refusing to be erased. Some called me a whistleblower, but I knew who I really was. The woman who refused to be silent. And this time, when I walked out of that courtroom, I didn't carry a cardboard box. I carried a legacy. Because somewhere out there, another Cassandra is being handed her cardboard box. And she needs to know, it doesn't end there. If stories of everyday heroes taking down giants light a fire in you, hit that subscribe button, because trust me, there's more where this came from.